For this project, I will be presenting on middle childhood and obesity, and I am Emma Dooling. As I mentioned, I will be discussing the developmental stage of middle childhood. The age range for the stage is 7 to 11 years of age. Historically, middle childhood represented a time where some children began to participate in the economy. Child labor was very common and started at this age. This changed in the Western world in the 20th century when this age range of children became the school age category, and this was reinforced through child education and labor laws. Some characteristics of middle childhood development is that they will mostly revolve around education, play, and social activities. Some of the other characteristics of the middle childhood developmental stage is that the physical developmental growth continues steadily and the nature and pace of it is influenced by genetic and environmental factors. It is very common for the development of asthma, ADHD, and obesity to occur. Children are expected to gain a high level of mastery over their physical skills. Recently, an earlier onset of puberty has been correlated with this developmental group as well. Children acquire the ability to communicate complex thoughts, and education plays a large role in this. Children are learning their identity more, and some start conceptualizing it as having dual or multiple parts to it. This is also a factor of culture identity development, where children of non-dominant groups may have their race or ethnicity become an important part of their search for identity. Emotional development is an especially important characteristic where children develop advanced coping skills. They are able to identify and describe their emotions as well as do this to others. Social comparison becomes common and emotional intelligence acquiescence occurs. Children also gain feelings of self-competence and begin to seek tasks to demonstrate this. An important characteristic is the gaining of peer groups and complex friendships that become as influential to them as the family. A characteristic for males specifically is the increase of identity with masculine roles, while for females, the shift to androgyny starts. Formal education, as mentioned earlier, helps to enforce all of these characteristics of this developmental stage. The topic of concern I've chosen is childhood obesity. The Mayo Clinic describes childhood obesity as a medical condition in which children are above the normal weight for their height and range. This means that their BMI is in the 95th percentile or higher for their height and age. This is of concern because of the increasing prevalence of childhood obesity. It has risen from 4% in 1975 to over 18% in 2016. In the US, obesity has a prevalence of 18.4% among children who are 6 through 11 years old. Child obesity also has immediate health risk, both physically and mentally, and is also a predictor for future health risk. Immediate physical health risks, as listed by the CDC, are high blood pressure and cholesterol, increased risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, breathing problems like asthma, joint problems, musculoskeletal discomfort, heartburn, fatty liver disease, gallstones, and heartburn. Immediate mental health risk may include psychological problems like anxiety and depression, bullying, and lower self-esteem. There are future health risks as well because children who are obese are most likely to remain or become obese again as an adult. The health risk as an adult associated with obesity are type 2 diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. Also, obesity is relevant to the current pandemic as well because it is classified as one of the health problems that puts people in the high-risk category for COVID-19. Many of the health conditions that are side effects of obesity, such as high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, are also in the risk category of COVID-19. In the next two slides, I will discuss organizational and community factors that relate to childhood obesity. The first one is socioeconomic status. It has been found that the prevalence of obesity is related to the level of education a household head, like a parent or guardian, has. For example, the more education a household head has, the less prevalent obesity is in that family. A study based on this found that obesity was 18.9% prevalent among the lowest income group and only 10.9% among the highest income groups. One study found that children in lower income neighborhoods had poorer diets and habits and took part in less physical activity. This is likely in direct relation to the environmental factors that occur in relation to socioeconomic status. Some of the environmental factors that relate to obesity are likely related to socioeconomic status as well. Where a child lives is one of the biggest environmental factors. Many low-income families live in communities that are food deserts. A food desert is an area where there is none or limited access to fresh fruit, to fresh food like fruit and vegetables or a grocery store. Food that is easily accessible is often overly processed junk food that one can get from a neighborhood mart. A study from Pennsylvania found that food desert in areas where a study in Pennsylvania found that there are increased rates of children who are overweight or have obesity that live in a food desert than areas where children do not live in food deserts. Other studies confirm that neighborhood food factors like living in a food desert are associated with obesity as well. Another environmental factor is the lack of options or opportunities for physical activity. The child might not live in a safe neighborhood where they can go out and play, or they may live in an area where there are no playgrounds or play structures. There are many environmental factors that intersect in someone's life based on their socioeconomic status that puts one at a disadvantage. For example, for the environmental factors, socioeconomic status influences where one lives. In the US, there's a disproportionality in obesity rate in race and ethnicity. Hispanic children have obesity prevalence of 25.8%, while Black children have a prevalence of 22%, and white children have one of 14.1%. Most of this is likely related to the socioeconomic disparities among different races and ethnicities in America. One study conducted in Massachusetts found that Hispanic and Black children had higher obesity rates, but when they controlled for factors like income levels, the prevalence disappeared. This shows that the influence of socioeconomic status is much more prevalent in obesity than just race or ethnicity. Adverse childhood experiences have also been linked to obesity. Studies have found an association between infants and toddlers who have an adverse childhood experience and obesity. Another study has found that children with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences had the poorest health outcomes among all the other children in the study. Another influence is family. There is a correlation between parent obesity and child obesity. Studies have found that a risk factor for children being overweight or obese is parental influence. A health survey conducted in 2017 in England have found that 28% of children who are obese who also had mothers who were obese, and mothers who were not obese, only 8% of the children were obese. A potential ethical dilemma when it comes to obesity could be a client's culture. Some cultures have different body image ideals than the Western media image. Many cultural gatherings also revolve around food, and it can be an important part of understanding one's heritage. And you would not want the child who's experienced obesity to suffer and become disconnected with his culture as a result of this. Some suggestions for countering this is the suggestion of healthifying culture foods that may be heavy in fats and low in nutrients. Another ethical dilemma that may occur is the client's right to self-determination and commitment to clients. In some cases, parents of children who are obese think that their child is fine. A study conducted in Canada found that 38% of parents could not accurately identify their child's weight category. In the same study, 63% of parents classified their children as only being overweight and not obese when they were. 15% of parents with children who were obese were not concerned with the weight of their child. This can be a problem if a parent thinks their child is not obese and do not want to do anything to change it. As a social worker, we are supposed to support a client's self-determination, in this case, the parents, but we also have a commitment to support the well-being of the client as well. Childhood obesity is of importance and relevant to social work practice because it is a social problem and a social justice issue. Physicians often will look at deficits in the child's life and try to fix those. The social worker, utilizing a strengths perspective, can look at strengths and positives in the child's life and build upon them to make a plan to combat child obesity. Childhood obesity requires a comprehensive intervention with many suggestions to utilize physicians, dietitians, and social workers. As I mentioned in the previous slide, childhood obesity is not just as simple as eating healthier and exercising. It requires a systems perspective to understand and address the behavioral and lifestyle changes that are needed to combat it. Especially in terms of this class, one study notes that the importance of remembering the child is a part of the family system in terms of childhood obesity. The family is also part of a community system, and this affects the family system's ability to make these lifestyle changes that fighting obesity requires for the child. Cultural awareness is important also because, as we've mentioned earlier, many culture gatherings involve food, and it is an important part to one's heritage. There's also an instance where an LCSW may work with an obese child who's experiencing depression or anxiety. The LCSW will need to understand the root causes of the depression and anxiety and what factors could be and what could be factors of it, and must understand the root causes to it, which could be obesity. Thank you for watching my presentation, and here are my references.